At 8:15 p.m. local time, absolute darkness swallowed the Strait of Hormuz, where a joint Special Operations Task Force comprising SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force, the most elite warriors on Earth, was rushing to execute a desperate rescue. Embarked on the USS John Finn, they aimed to liberate 50 international medical volunteers held hostage near Bandar Abbas. This mission of mercy, intended to protect innocent lives, was suddenly crushed by a treacherous ambush calculated by the military forces of Khamenei. The distress signal was a lure that led these Tier 1 operators directly into a pre-planned entrapment zone. As they approached the coordinates, 400 fast attack craft equipped with supercavitating torpedoes erupted from the shadows of Keshem Island like a mechanical storm, while 120 Bastion P anti-ship missiles screamed from mainland silos. The finest soldiers America has to offer found themselves instantly isolated behind a 50-mile radius of electronic jamming, facing an overwhelming armada that sought to erase their existence under a wave of kinetic force. Please leave a like right now if you stand on the side of justice, and let us see if righteousness can prevail against this overwhelming darkness. The Iranian command had transformed 600 miles of the southern coastline into an impenetrable steel fortress specifically designed for this moment. At the deep water port of Chabahar and the naval stronghold of Bandar Abbas, thousands of smart mines and hypersonic anti-ship missiles had been stockpiled over 60 months. The generals in Tehran held absolute confidence in their strategy, believing that the narrow geography of the strait, combined with an overwhelming ratio of 400 combat vessels against a single task force, would render the advanced Aegis defense systems completely useless. Their objective was to capture the legendary SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force operators, to create a geopolitical earthquake that would force the United States to abandon the Persian Gulf forever. They believed that even the mightiest giant would eventually fall to a million stinging insects. Now I want to ask you a question as the trap snaps shut. In this impossible situation, where elite warriors are surrounded by 520 hostile threats, including missiles and swarm boats, who do you think will emerge victorious? Type number 1, if you think the sheer numbers will overwhelm the Americans. Type number 2, if you believe superior technology will turn the tide. Let us hold our breath and witness the impossible. At 8:20 p.m., exactly 5 minutes after the trap was sprung, the peril became terrifyingly clear. On tactical displays, the situation looked like a mathematical impossibility. A mere 40 operators from SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force, the apex of the U.S. military, were trapped in a steel box surrounded by an ocean of hostility. Outnumbered 100 to 1, they faced a synchronized armada of 400 fast attack craft and 120 hypersonic missiles. The Iranian generals believed no amount of training could save this small unit from the sheer weight of a 3,000-man assault force. Yet inside the Combat Information Center, the operators stood with chilling calmness. They knew 50 innocent hostages were counting on them, transforming fear into razor-sharp focus. They were not fighting for conquest, but to hold the line between civilization and chaos. As the swarm breached the 800-yard perimeter, hundreds of vessels converged like a tightening noose. The American response was not panic, but surgical precision. Gunner mates initiated the Optical Dazzling Interdictor Navy (ODIN) and high-energy laser Helios systems. The destroyers unleashed a silent, invisible wall of pure energy traveling at 186,000 miles per second. This was the ultimate clash of eras, brute force against light-speed technology. Directed energy beams struck lead boats, heating engines to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit instantly. There were no bloody explosions, only the sudden disabling of machinery as aluminum hulls melted and electronics fried, leaving attackers drifting helplessly. It was a stunning demonstration that righteous defenders, armed with innovation, could halt a barbarian horde without firing a single bullet. However, the sky presented a threat testing human courage. 120 Bastion P anti-ship missiles screamed inbound at Mach 2.5, covering a mile every 2 seconds. On deck, elite operators watched smoke trails with stoic resolve, trusting their shield. The AN/SPY-6 air and missile defense radar tracked every warhead, processing terabytes of data with godlike perception. Vertical launch tubes roared, sending Standard Missile 6 interceptors streaking upward. The night sky over the Strait of Hormuz transformed into a blinding dome of protection, a shield of light raised by the few to protect the many. Every kinetic collision in the upper atmosphere was a thunderous rejection of tyranny. As the last missile vaporized in a brilliant flash 10 miles out, the impossible happened. The massive swarm broke against the unbreakable will of 40 men and 2 ships. But the silence that followed was not one of victory, but of absolute horror. A coded transmission from the mainland was intercepted by the ship sensors. Humiliated by the defeat, the enemy commander issued a final vengeful order regarding the 50 volunteers held in Bandar Abbas. Terminate the assets immediately. The defense of the ships had inadvertently triggered a countdown for the hostages. The operators realized with sinking hearts that their survival had just endangered the very people they came to save. They were 50 miles away, and the clock had just stopped ticking. The question was no longer about holding the line. It was whether they could reach the captives before the line went dead forever. That moment of paralyzing suspense inside the Combat Information Center did not last for even a single second, as the weight of the intercepted transmission signaling the final ultimatum triggered an immediate and thunderous evolution in the American strategy. The defensive posture that had protected the ships vanished instantly, replaced by the overwhelming kinetic fury of Operation Ocean Fury, because the rules of engagement had fundamentally changed from survival to salvation. The United States Central Command authorized the full and unrestricted release of heavy assets to clear a burning path to Bandar Abbas before the captors could carry out their grim directive. From the crushing depths of the Arabian Sea, 3 Ohio-class guided missile submarines surfaced like leviathans of the deep, breaking the surface with terrifying majesty. These vessels, the USS Florida, the USS Georgia, and the USS Michigan, opened their 154 vertical launch silos, revealing a combined payload of 462 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles. In a synchronized launch sequence that defied belief, the dark ocean night was illuminated by the ignition of hundreds of solid rocket motors, turning the sea into a cauldron of fire and steam. This was not a random bombardment. It was a surgical dismantling of the enemy infrastructure designed to paralyze their command capabilities without harming a single civilian. The missiles streaked across the sky at 550 miles per hour, hugging the terrain at 50 feet to evade detection, weaving through the valleys like angry hornets. Their targets were the command nodes, radar installations, and communication towers that allowed the hostile forces to coordinate their actions, effectively severing the head of the snake. Simultaneously, the B-21 Raider stealth bombers, which had been loitering invisibly at 50,000 feet, released their specialized payload. They deployed the Counter-Electronics High-Power Microwave Missile Project, or CHAMP. As these advanced devices detonated over the port of Bandar Abbas, they released a massive pulse of high-power microwave energy that washed over the city like a silent tsunami. In a nanosecond, the entire electrical grid of the coastal city went dark as computers' fried radios went silent, and the electronic magnetic locks on the detention center failed completely. The guards preparing to carry out the final act were plunged into absolute darkness and confusion, their orders lost in the static. This was the window of opportunity the operators needed. Moving under the cover of the chaos, 4 CV-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft carrying the 40 elite operators from SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force roared toward the coastline at 300 miles per hour, flying just 50 feet above the water, masked by the electronic blackout. As they touched down, the operators moved with supernatural fluidity, equipped with panoramic night vision goggles, giving them a decisive advantage. They utilized advanced flashbang grenades and sonic incapacitation devices to overwhelm the disoriented guards without lethal fire. The The psychological impact of seeing 40 armored giants emerge from the darkness shattered the enemy resolve instantly. Inside the holding cells, the 50 international volunteers huddled together, paralyzed, believing the end had come. Then the steel door was breached by a hydraulic spreader. A beam of white light cut through the gloom, and a calm American voice spoke the words they had prayed to hear, stating, "We are the United States Navy, and you are going home." Tears of relief replaced tears of fear as the hostages were guided to the waiting aircraft. As the Ospreys lifted off, the final phase commenced to ensure no pursuit was possible. The Tomahawk missiles impacted the port facilities of Bandar Abbas and Chabahar with earth-shaking force. Giant cranes collapsed, empty fuel depots ignited, and naval docks were rendered inoperable. The strategic ports were neutralized to break the sword of the aggressor, ensuring they could not launch another attack. In less than 40 minutes, the United States had dismantled a fortress, saved 50 lives, and proven that the hand of justice can reach into the deepest darkness. As the sun rose over the Persian Gulf at 5:30 a.m., the silence that blanketed the Iranian coastline was absolute. The strategic ports of Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, and Jask, once the crown jewels of the Iranian Navy, were now smoking ruins of twisted steel. In less than 1 hour, the geopolitical balance of the Middle East had shifted permanently. The damage assessment relayed to the Pentagon was staggering. 3 major naval bases were rendered completely non-operational. Over 800 military vessels, including the entire swarm fleet of fast attack craft and the 5 Mauj-class frigates, were reduced to scrap metal littering the ocean floor. The integrated air defense network, built with billions in foreign technology, had been blinded and dismantled, leaving the coast wide open. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz was broken not by a months-long war of attrition, but by a 40-minute display of technological superiority, proving that mass numbers cannot defeat precision engineering. But the most important statistic of Operation Ocean Fury was measured in 53 human heartbeats. On the flight deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, 50 international volunteers stepped off the Osprey aircraft into the warm morning light. They were dirty and shaken, but they were alive. The sight of these men and women embracing the sailors who had risked everything to save them was the true victory. It was a stark reminder that behind every missile launch, there are human lives hanging in the balance. The operation proved that the United States military is not just a force of destruction, but a shield for the defenseless, capable of projecting power to preserve life rather than take it. The reaction from the aggressors was telling. The silence from Tehran and their suppliers in Moscow was deafening. The invincible fortress they claimed to have built was exposed as a hollow shell. The hypersonic missiles failed to penetrate the Aegis shield. The electronic warfare systems failed to blind the American sensors. Every guarantee of security provided by foreign powers collapsed when faced with the reality of American naval power. The world watched in awe as a decades-long ambition to control the global energy supply evaporated in a single night. Yet amidst the wreckage, there was no celebration of violence, only a solemn recognition of its necessity. The smoke rising from the empty fuel depots served as a grim monument to the folly of aggression. Peace had been restored to the vital waterway, but the scars of the conflict remained etched into the landscape, a physical testament to what happens when diplomacy ends and the engines of war begin to turn. When the last engine shuts down and the adrenaline fades, we are left with a chilling truth. There are no real winners in war, only survivors. We spend billions creating machines to end life, yet we hesitate to spend a single moment to understand it. A mother crying for her lost son sounds exactly the same in English as it does in Persian. Pain has no nationality. Blood is always red. The earth was meant to grow food for our children, not to dig graves for our soldiers. To those watching who cherish life over land and kindness over conflict, we ask you to stand up. Do not let the world become a graveyard of ambition. Let us build bridges instead of bunkers. Let us use our hands to heal instead of harm. If this story touched your heart, And if you dream of a world where soldiers can finally go home to their families, please subscribe and share this video. Be the voice that says enough. Peace begins with you.